What if everything we thought we knew about modern civilization was incomplete? A quiet lecture from a Chinese professor has gone viral across the world, forcing historians, scientists, and students to rethink where modern progress truly began. His name is Professor Jiang Zukin, a Chinese educator known for connecting the dots between civilizations. In his lecture titled Civilization Number 37, The Golden Age of Islam, he said words that shocked millions online. Islam was one of humanity's greatest intellectual revolutions. It shaped modernity itself so deeply that we no longer recognize its influence. Those words didn't come from a Muslim scholar. They came from an atheist-born academic in China, a man trained in Western history, and that's exactly why people listened. Because for once, the truth was coming from outside the Muslim world. Professor Jiang is a historian and educator at the forefront of China's global education movement. He spent decades studying how civilizations rise and fall, how cultures borrow from one another, and how human knowledge evolves over centuries. For most of his career, he taught that modern civilization was a European achievement, the result of the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the Industrial Revolution. But the more he researched, the more he realized the story didn't start there. He began tracing Europe's so-called rebirth backward and discovered something extraordinary. The foundation of modern science, medicine, law, and global trade had been laid centuries earlier under Islamic civilization. This discovery didn't fit neatly into textbooks. It was too complex, too politically inconvenient, but the evidence was overwhelming. Between the 8th and 13th centuries, while medieval Europe was fractured by feudalism and religious conflict, the Muslim world experienced a cultural explosion. From Cordoba in Spain to Baghdad, Cairo, and Samarkand, the Islamic Empire became a living network of scholars, libraries, and laboratories. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad stood at its center, a translation institute, research center, and university all in one. Greek philosophy, Persian astronomy, Indian mathematics, and Chinese papermaking all met there, merged, and advanced together. Here, Al-Khwarizmi developed algebra and algorithms. Ibn al-Haytham created the first principles of optics and the experimental method. Al-Zahrawi wrote encyclopedias on surgery, still studied centuries later. And Fatima al-Fihri, a Muslim woman, founded the world's first university in Fez 200 years before Oxford existed. Jiang called it humanity's first scientific network, an ecosystem of reason, faith, and experimentation bound by one idea from the Quran itself. Read, observe, reflect. Knowledge wasn't separate from worship. It was worship. What stunned Jiang most wasn't just the inventions, it was the mindset. Islamic civilization had developed a systematic approach to knowledge. Observation, hypothesis, experimentation, and verification. These weren't European inventions. They were practiced in Muslim laboratories 5 centuries before Francis Bacon. Hospitals in Baghdad kept detailed medical records. Astronomers measured planetary motion with astonishing precision. Engineers built water clocks, irrigation systems, and optical instruments. And most importantly, they saw reason as sacred, where medieval Europe saw curiosity as heresy. Islam saw it as a path to God. Jiang later said, Islam did not destroy ancient science, it completed it. It turned philosophy into physics, speculation into method. By the 11th century, Europe began to awaken. Through Muslim Spain and Sicily, knowledge began to flow north. In Toledo, Christian and Muslim translators worked side by side to convert Arabic manuscripts into Latin. What Europe later called rediscovery was, in fact, translation. From Al-Jabr came algebra. From alchemia came chemistry. From Al-Khwarizmi came the word algorithm. And the concept of the university, complete with curriculum, degrees, and libraries, came directly from Muslim models. By the time the Renaissance began, Europe wasn't inventing modernity from scratch. It was inheriting it. Jiang's conclusion was simple yet radical. Europe's light was kindled by lamps lit in the Muslim world. But if that's true, why do so few remember? Jiang points to 2 reasons: colonial narratives and historical amnesia. When Europe rose to global dominance after the 15th century, it rewrote the story of progress, centering itself as the origin of reason and science. Islamic achievements were downplayed, dismissed as mere transmission. Textbooks reduced the Golden Age to a footnote, a bridge between Greece and Europe. But Jiang's research paints a different picture. Islam was not a bridge, it was the architect. The empire's multilingual networks, from Arabic to Persian, Turkish to Chinese, created a truly global civilization long before globalization had a name. It connected scholars from 3 continents under one pursuit: knowledge for the sake of truth. In his lecture, Jiang emphasized how many features of today's world still carry the DNA of that Islamic revolution. Our numerical system, the very digits we use, originated in the Muslim world. Our scientific institutions evolved from Islamic madrasas. Our global economy still uses principles first tested in medieval Islamic trade routes. Even our moral framework of law above rulers, the idea that justice is universal and not bound to kings, that too came from Islamic jurisprudence. When we use algorithms, practice medicine, or follow rational inquiry, we're walking paths paved by Muslim scholars 1,000 years ago, even if we've forgotten their names. When Jiang's lecture clip hit social media, it exploded. Millions of views in days. Comment sections flooded with gratitude, especially from young Muslims who had never heard their civilization described this way. For many, it wasn't pride, it was relief. Proof that their heritage had given the world more than just monuments, it had given modernity itself. But Jiang also faced backlash. Some Western academics accused him of exaggeration, of Islamic revisionism. He replied calmly, "Acknowledging truth isn't bias, it's correction." His words resonated precisely because they came from outside the Muslim world, from a Chinese voice with no religious motive, only historical curiosity. And that objectivity made the message undeniable. In his closing remarks, Professor Jiang Zukin said something profound. Modernity was never a gift from one, civilization to another. It was humanity learning from itself, and Islam was the bridge that made it possible. He called Islam the first civilization to universalize knowledge. It took ideas from every corner of the earth, from Athens to Alexandria, from India to China, and fused them under a worldview that saw all truth as God's truth. That synthesis became the launchpad for everything that followed. So perhaps the real question isn't whether Islam created modernity, but whether the modern world still remembers the source of its light. Because as Jiang reminds us, civilizations don't rise by accident. They rise when knowledge is sacred, when learning is moral, when discovery itself is seen as divine. And in that sense, the Islamic Golden Age was not just history, it was a blueprint for humanity's future. The forgotten revolution, Islam and the birth of modern civilization.